I didn't really go into hospital until a year. Basically, had my remission party, which we've never ever done again. Went out for a meal with the family. It was easy, and everyone did like a couple of speeches and stuff like that. And I remember sitting there thinking like the biggest fraud in the world because I knew that it was back. And yeah, the day after I woke up in the middle of the night with blood clot on my mouth, and the next morning I had a golf ball sized lymph node on the side of my neck, and I'm just thought I can't hide this anymore. And I went into the kitchen just basically in tears to mum saying it's come back, it's come back, it's come back.
Hello and welcome to the Thrive Against Cancer podcast, where we give a voice to the cancer community. My name is Toby Freeman, founder and CEO of the Robin Cancer Trust, cancer advocate and your host. Every episode we will be hosting open and honest conversations with people affected by cancer, whether personally, as a family member, clinician or charities and organisations. We will be talking to the cancer community about the cancer community and all the things that are important to you. Our guest today is a two-time teenage cancer patient with a stem cell transplant drizzled on top for good measure. Post-cancer has been a maze and one he struggled to navigate, but has found solace in the community and pushing himself mentally and physically with charity events and challenges. He's now fortunate enough to be married and have a miracle baby who was conceived naturally despite doctors saying it would never happen. Our guest today is Rian Harvey. Rian, thank you so much for being here.
No, thanks for having me on, and thank you for that for a very kind intro as well. So,
Rian, if you could take us all the way back from your journey, your story, your experiences from the very beginning when you were first diagnosed.
Yeah, definitely. Like I say, I feel like it's a story that I've said so many times. I can basically reel it off without any kind of thought process on it. I think that's probably similar for a lot of people that have been through something like this. Before I go into it, that was like a time about a year or so ago when I was hosting an event, and I had a cue card stand in front of me with my story written on me. And I remember looking up at the crowd and just going, I don't actually need these, and just basically just getting rid of them and just saying the story from scratch because you don't need them. It's a big moment in your life. So yeah, like you said there, and you said in the intro, I've had it twice, and I was so good. I did it twice, which obviously it wasn't so good, but you learn from it. So yeah, basically my initial diagnosis stretches right back to 2013, which is obviously feels like a monster of a time ago now. It was basically I was in school. And I remember sort of finishing some holidays, and that's kind of when my symptoms started. That sort of 6-week break we'll get. The first one I ever always remember this. I was at a friend's house, kind of probably about a week into some holidays, and I remember sort of waking up in the middle of the night and being absolutely soaked in sweat, which obviously, as we now know, is a massive symptom of stuff like this. And then those symptoms kind of progressed very, very slowly over the summer holidays. They kind of popped up enough for me to kind of notice they were happening, but then shrink down quick enough for me to not really do much about it. And it basically became a thing like anybody when you're kind of like a teenager, you just kind of ignore what's going on and you kind of push it to the side. And a lot of the stuff, obviously, with what it is, it's really, really easy to kind of relate it to hormone changes and being a teenager as well. So went through some holidays and just kind of got progressively more unwell, and got to starting school again. And the thing that kind of got me to hospital where I got my diagnosis was a leg injury. Basically, I play football, and I woke up one morning and had like a really tight hamstring. And I wasn't the fittest back then by any means. A lot fitter now than I was back then. But I woke up, had this kind of hamstring problem, and thought, oh, I must turn it to football. Went around a county show near us for the whole day and kind of walked it off. And then it was better, and the next day again bad, and it basically just got progressively worse over the next 2 weeks as I got more and more unwell. He saw me go to the doctors to see what was wrong. The doctor gave me some cream, and he thought it might just be again a muscle injury, so just sort of massage this cream into it, and gave me that kind of old adage saying from a doctor: if it gets no better, come back and we'll have another look. Yeah, the classic. Yeah, if that hasn't worked, come back and have another look. It's like their version of the switch on and switch back, switch it off and switch it back on. So yeah, he did. They did that, and ultimately, the reason I'm sat doing this podcast, it didn't get better. Went back about a week later, after I'd been waking up in the night having panic attacks. I was off school at this point. My leg had jarred into kind of like an angle where I couldn't walk. Went back to the doctors, and he said to me, I don't think you've broken your leg, but I'm going to send you for an x-ray tomorrow just to see if there's like a chip bone or something there that's causing some kind of infection. So went to went to the hospital the next day for an X-ray. And I always remember it because actually that morning I woke up feeling better than I had for weeks. It was like I felt all right, and I kind of ate for the first time that I had properly in weeks. I remember waking up and making like those like frozen baguettes. I remember put one of them in the oven because everyone had gone to work and school. Mum was going to come back and pick me up to have his X-ray. I always distinctly remember putting one of those baguettes in the oven and having a bacon baguette. And I remember just eating that and thinking, this is weird because I haven't felt like eating in the morning for weeks. But I felt all right eating that day. Went and had my X-ray. Obviously, you can stand behind the screen and kind of see it, and Mum had done that, and she didn't really see anything. And remember, as we were walking out of the X-ray department, she turned to me and said, "We're going to go to A&E." And I had we had a bit of a bickering argument, like a teenager and his mum in the car park, about why I have to go to A&E because the doctor said it was fine. And she basically won me over with this argument that it could be deep vein thrombosis, which is something that my granddad had. And she was obviously quite concerned about something like that because it can progress to something very, very serious and fatal. So after a bit of an argument, Mum won, as they always do, and took me to A&E. And I remember her walking up to the front desk and saying to the person, "I hope we're not wasting your time, but I just want to get this checked out." And they were very kind and said, "Look, you never not wasting time at all." And then went through the list of symptoms. And I remember sitting down in the wait room and it being 3.5 hours. And then we were literally seen within 20 minutes after we gave all the symptoms over and we put into triage room, and obviously went further into what was going on. And then before we knew it, we were sort of put into a pediatric trauma room and blood tests were taken. The results came back, and within 3 hours, I had a consultant who stood at the front of my bed saying, you've got anemia and we think you might have leukemia too. Um, and that's when kind of the cycle started, and I was put straight into hospital. I was so unwell that like I remember like my body kind of like giving in and kind of going like, oh, thank God we've got an answer now. That's what it felt like because I walked into A&E on crutches and I couldn't get up to walk after told me that news. I was put in a wheelchair and wheeled up to the children's ward, and then put on all sorts of antibiotics and kept in that children's ward over the weekend. Sort of woke up in the middle of the night for prods, and the sort of that everyone knows that kind of like first stage where they're poking and prodding you all the time, just trying to find out what it is. And kind of woke up in the middle of the night by like blood tests and all sorts. Watching crap TV on the Freeview TV that it had in hospital rooms, like all like the old school movies and stuff like that. Sort of watching that, getting toast, and
toast and tea.
Yeah, toast and tea, the classic. Yeah, I remember actually in that weekend, and I don't think I've already said this and doing my story. I remember Mum being on the phone to a friend outside, and in the hospital ward we had. I was in the rooms. You had like kind of a double door into like a room where they had like the aprons and stuff, and then you had like two rooms either side. And Mum was in the middle room before we came into my room on the phone to a friend, a close family friend. And I remember her saying, I just overheard it, 80% chance of survival. And I didn't really know what we were in at this point. I knew like leukemia was cancer, and that was actually down to a footballer who'd been diagnosed with leukemia. That's still in Petrov for Aston Villa. About
Aston Villa captain, yeah.
And I only knew what it was because he was so open about his diagnosis, and I'd read it in Match a Day and Match magazine and stuff like that. So which is I actually met him at a football tournament last year, and I sort of said, "You were the reason that I knew what it was." And I said, "Like, thank you for being so open because I knew what it was because of you being so open about it," which is why I'm so passionate about sort of talking about it when I get an opportunity to. But yeah, my mum saying that 20% chance of survival and no 80% chance of survival, and then 20% kind of being ringing in my head of being like, yeah, so it's good odds for anybody looking at it externally, but you are just thinking about, do I fall into that 20%? Am I be in that 20%? Basically that next week flew by. We got put in Southampton Hospital. Mum and Dad sort of bartered with the ambulance team when they were able to drive me up to Southampton Hospital. They said that you'll be expected at this time, make sure you're up at that time. So we sort of all drove up in a really kind of like weird kind of trying to distract ourselves, silence. Stopped at McDonald's in Southampton, had a McDonald's in the car park, and then sort of went out to the hospital and got admitted into Southampton Hospital, into the Pine Brown ward, which is where a lot of the treatment's done for younger children. And yeah, from there I had a week of basically tests and tests and tests, and I just kept getting progressively more unwell because I had to figure out what was wrong with my leg. Obviously, that wasn't leukemia. Basically, my leg had swelled up. There was an abscess on there. We did a lot of research, and it got to the point where my consultant was saying to having an argument essentially with the theatre team and saying you have to operate on his leg because I can't start chemotherapy until we figure out what this infection is because he's clearly got infections. His blood markers are through the roof.
Mm.
You know, his temperatures are spiking above like 39 degrees. Like I was hallucinating from the temperatures I was having. Like it was really weird. I remember having like duvets put on top of me, and me still shivering and being cold, and having like 3 or 4 duvets and blankets on top of me. Um, and eventually they sort of went in blinded to the operation after she very, very sternly told them that they were going to do what she told them to do. She was a lady who carried a lot of like numbers and letters around her name, and she'd been in the game long enough to kind of control the hospital.
Yeah.
She was a very, very small woman. She was an Irish lady called Dr. Morgan, and she was a very, very small lady, but she was in charge of that ward, you could tell.
Wow.
And she basically told them what they're going to do, and they went into the operation. I remember them saying to, well, Mum told me, they said to her that when I went down for this leg operation, I was going to come up without a left leg, or wasn't going to come up at all. Like I'd either die on the operating table, or I would lose my leg. And Mum and Dad said it was the longest 4.5 hours of their life. And I came back up, and I had my leg, and I was still alive. So I kind of avoided both of those scenarios.
Wow.
And they found out it was something called a Staph infection, and basically eating away at my hamstring, and that was obviously caused through having a low immunity because of the cancer that had built up in there as well. And there's something that just happened to kind of cause that infection. So I had eaten away at half a hamstring. For anybody squeamish, don't listen for the next 20 seconds. But basically said that when they cut it open, my hamstring just kind of fell out like black mush. It was all just horrible and gone. Um, so they left it to drain overnight, and then went back in for another operation the next day to seal it all up. And then was told I'd have to have like extensive physiotherapy. My consultant said, "Look, like there's no guarantees that you're going to be able to like properly run around again. Like this might just be your leg now forever, but ultimately, like you're better off surviving than you are, being able to run around. Like it's a sacrifice." But the physiotherapy I had for the next 6 months, which was like one of them was a contraption machine which my leg would go into, and they'd basically just it was like a um, metal machine which just slowly straighten my leg, and they'd just change it by like a millimeter
Mm.
every day, just slowly straighten my leg. And I'd just do it for about an hour. I'd lay in bed for an hour, and it just slowly sort of stretch it and then straighten it, stretch it and straighten it. And they did that for 6 months, and eventually I was able to kind of straighten my leg, and I'm able to run around now. Obviously, I've you know did the marathon last year that I
Yeah.
was fortunate to do. I've done all the challenges I've done, and that's because of that physiotherapy as well. Um, but yeah,
That's
that was a start. That was just the first week.
I feel
Um,
I feel like we could unpick that. As you're talking, I'm sitting here and my brain is just going, you're 14 as well. Like, because when you listen, you're comprehending it as you can now, and that's so much. But you're 14. You don't know what
yeah,
cancer is, you don't know, like you've got your whole life ahead of you, you've got school, you've got all the normal things to worry about, and then we've just brushed past you've got cancer. And then
yeah,
we've just brushed past your hamstrings completely mush and you may never run around again. And you're in
yeah.
hospital and you're removed from everything. And how are you comprehending any of this as it's going on, or are you just survival mode? Things are happening to me.
I think I just went into like survival mode. Like this is just happening. There's nothing I can do
Mm.
about it. I'm actually almost in a really weird way. I feel quite thankful that I was like so unwell, which sounds really weird, but I was at the point where I was having so many drugs constantly. I was probably out of my head a lot of the
Mm.
time. I didn't really know what was going on, and because I was so young as well, I was shielded from those conversations of like this could potentially happen. Um, so yeah, like that was a hell of a start, and
Mm.
had my 6 months of chemotherapy, and went into remission very, very fortunately. And then a year later, was told that I'd relapsed, which unfortunately is quite common with AML. When I was treated, I don't know what the sort of situation is that now. When I was treated, it was quite a common thing.
Did you
Um,
know that going in that you might relapse when you had?
No, I didn't know that to start off with. My mum knew, but she made a decision with my consultant not to tell me, which I think was the right decision. So they didn't tell me. So the consultant was very transparent and mum that like the relapse rate was quite high with
Mm.
just chemotherapy, but they had to try it first without a stem cell transplant. And when I relapsed, my consultant said to me, like, look, I was kind of expecting you to come back, and I was kind of waiting to see when you'd come back in again. But then she said, which sounds really weird, she went, the positive thing of this is you made it through a year, which is always quite a good point, apparently. If you get through that first year, it's not, if you don't get through that first year, it's not like you've got no chance.
Mm.
It's just, she said that just statistically, which again, like, you look at statistics with all of cancer, like look at the statistics of me having our little boy, like I think that I always say to everybody, like they're just statistics, they're numbers, they're done off thousands of people, and it doesn't mean that it's 100% what's going to happen. It doesn't mean it's 100% what's not going to happen. Like they are just, it's just a number, and that person isn't just a number. You aren't just a number. You're individual to that case, but they just have to work off that to give people like, this could happen, that could happen, that sort of thing. They have to do that. It's just like it's being open with people. But yeah, after that first year, and I relapsed, and I remember hiding my symptoms from my family and stuff like that. When I got to the relapse, so I was like it was like Christmas time. I was like a year out of hospital, and after that first kind of horrible 6 months of chemotherapy, which to be fair were pretty plain sailing. It was just your classic AML stuff, nothing really too extreme. After that, play FIFA, have my chemotherapy, feel like crap, watch some films, watch some box sets, and then go home for 2 days and then do it all again.
I feel like that was the most like cancer patient way of surmising. So it's just like your classic AML chemo. It was horrible, but just
it was just your classic stuff, yeah. Like you just have the concoction, feel crap for a couple of weeks, and then feel good for a couple of days, and then get back into hospital and do it all again. But you find out a coping mechanism, and my coping mechanism was watching films and playing FIFA and playing Xbox, and that was always my coping mechanism. That's what I just did. Mixed in with like going down to the Costa in hospital and people watching with mum for a little bit, and kind of having my daily routine, which mum would come up from whatever like sort of charity house she was staying in. She'd bring a coffee, we'd sit, we'd have a coffee, like watch a bit of crappy TV, then I'd have a bath or a shower when I was able to. And then we just kind of like build a routine into the day of like being in hospital, not just sitting there in bed all the time. Like mum was very much on that. That wasn't me, that was her. And I will always be thankful for her doing that, is having like a routine. Like you get up, you do that, you do that, you do that, and then you do that, and then you watch this, and you go to bed at that sort of thing, and having that kind of set routine. It wasn't regimented. Point if I wasn't doing it, mum was like, "Why aren't you up now?" But it was more just to give me something to kind of get up and do.
I love that because it drives a purpose and something to look forward to over a period where what we haven't talked about is how isolated you are during your chemotherapy. Because I know this, my brother had secondary AML. And I remember the isolation wards. Like you are in a room, a shut door. You can't do too much for extended periods. You are in the hospital, then you come home for a little bits of respite. You're in the hospital. It's sort of the flip of what quite a lot of chemotherapies can be, which is a bit of chemo at home for a long time, chemo at home for a long time.
Yeah,
I assume that was similar for you.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like it's that kind of isolation of it, and I think I probably didn't really think about that as much when I was going through it. Like you get friends on the ward and stuff like that, and I used to get quite not jealous because obviously everyone's got cancer, but almost jealous a little bit because they'd be at home for like long periods of time, whereas like I would go home from my chemotherapy where I'd been in hospital for 10 days already, and then I would know that I'd have maybe 3 or 4 days, and then my neutrophils would drop down to zero, and I'd be straight into hospital, and it might feel fine, I might feel absolutely fine. My neutrophils are zero, I'm in hospital, and then I'll go to my local hospital, which was not equipped, like obviously not equipped for cancer patients, equipped for like a child's ward, but it might be in this little box room which is very very small, and I'd have a tiny window view, and I'd see my parents coming in and out, I'd see my siblings coming in and out, and I'd just be stuck in this room on this door that's not locked, but I can't go outside of the door, and you're kind of sat there, tiny little box TV. Again, not being unfortunate, like I was very, very lucky to even have a TV and stuff in there as well. But like, it's just small things like that. There's no sofa or anything like that. I had my hospital bed, and then we turned mum's fold-down bed into a sofa in the day, so I could like get out of the same bed. And it wouldn't be a case of being in that hospital room for, a week. It'd be a case of being in the hospital room for like potentially 3 weeks. Like, it's not just like a couple of days. Oh, then you're out. It's like 3 weeks of being in one room, and a couple of weeks feeling really, really unwell, and then you feel better and you get better, and you'd be waiting for your neutrophils to come back up again. You go home for 2 days, and you'd be back in Southampton Hospital, and you start the whole process again. So I used to, it used to be quite tough. Like I used to come out of the hospital ward in Dorchester, which is where I'm from, after my isolation period when my neutrophils went down to nil, and I'd come out and I wouldn't be able to walk down the hallway because like I would have lost so much stamina just from not being up on my feet at all for 3 weeks. I would have just been sat down for 3 weeks. and yeah, that was tough. But I had an incredible network around me. One of my best friends, or my best friend, Billy, he'd come up after school every single day, and we'd play FIFA together.
Oh, I love
And
that.
he did it every single day. Yeah, I remember the school was up the road, and the path he'd walk down to come up the road, I could see from the hostel room. So I'd know when school finished because I'd get busy that road, and
Yeah,
then I'd be like, Bill's in there somewhere, and then like next thing you know, you get like you hear the door open, and then he'd be in, and he'd stay from about sort of 3:45, 4 o'clock until probably 5:36 when his parents finish work in their shop that they have in town, their camping shop, and then they'd come pick him up. And they'd maybe like sometimes they'd like be like they'd drop some McDonald's off or something for me on the way, and then my mum would come back and she'd spend the evening with me. And then when I was older, because I was like 14, the second time around when I was like 15, mum would go home because it was only 5 minutes up the road. So she'd go home and I'd be on my own at night time, which I used to kind of enjoy. Like it's nice having some time to
mm.
yourself, and sort of doing your own thing. But yeah, you kind of build a routine around it. I look at it now and I think, oh, that was like a quite an like intense like period of time in my life. And I'm only probably getting to the point now, like I'm 25 now, and I'm looking back on it, and I'm seeing both stints of my cancer journey, from the first one and the second one when I had my transplant, and seeing the impacts it's actually had on my life.
Mm.
And I've done like therapy and stuff like that, over the phone last year, which was through Anthony Nolan, who gave me a stem cell transplant. And that therapist, even though it was only eight sessions, she made me realise actually why a lot of the way that I am is actually completely normal for what I've been through. And I don't know anybody else. Well, I do now. I know people that have had cancer, and people around us that have cancer, but none of my close friends have been through something like that.
Yeah,
Apart from one of my closest mates in the ward, Adam Bromley, but then he wasn't part of my schoolmates. If you know what I mean? Like he was a mate from cancer, and we'd always chat. We still do now, and we get on. We had that shared experience. But in terms of my school friends and the friends that I see every day, like none of them have that kind of experience of what that's like. So I compare my life to them, and then I look at my life and the way my head works. And I found my way now. It always needs adjusting, as it does in anything. You always have to adjust how you live and how you notice things. But I look at their life and my life, and I think, well, why can't I do that? Or why doesn't my brain work that way? And then she'd be like, look, you had like 3 years of like in the most important part of social development, and
yeah,
the most important part of like where you go make all your mistakes and you learn from your mistakes. Like you were in hospital being looked after by like everybody, and everyone controlled all your
yeah,
decisions, and you never got to go through that process. So she was like, don't beat yourself up, like that. It's just part of you growing up. Like you're just a little bit behind on some things, but then you're also a little bit ahead on other things because you've had to grow up quite quickly as well. And that's the message I give to anybody that went through it or goes through it or is going through it at that age. Like it will stunt growth in areas that you don't realize until you're older, but don't beat yourself up about it, because ultimately, you're going to catch up, and it's not your fault, and it's not, other people are in that boat as well. But just, take time and be patient with it. And I think actually, in a broader sense, like society and people around other people have to take time as well and be patient with people that have been through stuff like that, because it's not just a you're better, you had cancer and you're better now. It's a you've had cancer, and there's so many effects that actually come on after that you don't even know about yourself as a cancer patient
yeah,
until it props up. And then when you actually sit back and think about it, which might be the issue might pop up, and then you might not think about it until 3 years down the line, and then you look back at that issue, and then you might go see a therapist another 3 years down the line. So you're maybe 6 years away from the issue that happened, and then you go, oh, that's the reason I did that. It's because I hadn't that happened and that happened and that happened. So I think just take time, and everyone has to kind of just be patient with everybody, like not just cancer patients, anybody in life, like be patient with everybody, because you don't know what they've been through, and how it's had an impact on their life growing up. So
yeah. Well, I know that's fantastic advice, and I think that's one of those long-term effects isn't talked about. And I know you're really passionate about normalizing these sort of conversations, and I think that's why your social channels, especially, really resonate with the whole cancer community. But it's really important for young men to be talking about this. The sort of things you're talking about: being kind to yourself, therapy, finding community. I think men are potentially worse at that, and it's really important.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
not to jump too far back, but we were at remission, and we haven't even talked about your stem cell transplant and everything that's gone on there. Do you want to talk about that? And
yeah. So like I say, I relapsed, and I remember hiding the symptoms. I remember noticing the symptoms. It was kind of Christmas, so I would have relapsed in Christmas 2014. So it'd have been like a year afterwards. I remember noticing like little symptoms just after Christmas.
that
Nose
hiding of
bleed.
symptoms, sorry, have you unpicked that, as in like is that something you get frustrated at yourself for, or are you kind to yourself that you're like, that is a normal response after everything I went through? I just didn't want to be back there.
Yeah, I've never like beat myself up
Mm,
about it, because I don't think that's fair. I think it was just like I was so adamant I didn't want to go back into that
yeah.
space again. I was really just finding my feet again. Like
Mm.
I'd work my socks off to catch up on my schoolwork because I didn't do any schoolwork on treatment. Like even though the teachers were there, I used to tell the nurse, I'd be like, "Can you just tell them I'm too unwell today and don't come round?" And they'd be like, "Oh, okay, Ryan. Yeah, we're telling you feel sick, whatever." I was
Is
just
that you playing the cancer card to get out of
yeah,
homework?
exactly. Yeah. I'll play FIFA all day. I'll be all right. But yeah, I caught up my schoolwork. I worked really hard to do that, and then I just remember just thinking like I'm just getting a foothold back in my life now, and
Mm,
things going down the pan again. And I yeah picked up on nosebleeds, picked up on night sweats. I remember one of my closest friends, whose mum actually did the food at our wedding in July, and I told her about this. He picked up on the fact that I was pale. I remember him saying to me
mm,
at school like, "You're looking quite pale, mate, in February." And I was like, "Yeah, well, it's just because it's February." And then I had a cold that wouldn't go away, and I remember mum taking me into hospital to try and get tested for it,
mm,
and I just refused to let them take blood because I knew what was going to come up. Um, it didn't come in. It didn't really go into hospital until a year. Basically, had my remission party, which we've never ever done again. Went out for a meal with the family. It was easy, and everyone did like a couple of speeches and stuff like that. And I remember sitting there thinking like the biggest fraud in the world because I knew that it was back. Um, and yeah, the day after I woke up in the middle of the night with blood clot on my mouth, I remember just spitting it out and just seeing the tissue and it was just blood. And then next morning, I had a golf ball sized lymph node on the side of my neck, and I just thought I can't hide this anymore. And I went into the kitchen just basically in tears. So mum saying it's come back, it's come back, it's come back, and I know it's come back. Mum saying, mum trying to be like quite positive, saying like we don't know, and I was like, no, I know what this
mm.
is. I know that it's come back. I know that I've hid it, and I just remember lying on the sofa just crying. And mum said, mum had to go to work, and she I think wanted to come to hospital, but dad was like, look, I'll take him. Um, and he did, and yeah, yeah, went into blood tests. And actually, it was weird because I kind of had those 3 months of symptoms to kind of accept it in my head.
Mhm.
I felt more relieved than anything else, and I got into hospital and I saw the same familiar faces that I'd seen it before. My consultant from the local hospital doing a blood test. Interestingly, which is quite weird, I remember looking up when we after had the blood test, went down to the restaurant in the hospital, and had a meal with dad. And I remember looking up and seeing the same consultant who had diagnosed me in A&E, who I hadn't seen since he diagnosed me in A&E, walking through a door. Like just as I looked up, he walked through a door and disappeared again. And I was like, that's really weird because I had not seen him ever since the day that he diagnosed me in A&E because the hematologist for the whole hospital. Um, which gives you a sense of how small the hospital is. But like, he wasn't dealing with my treatment; he just diagnosed me in A&E, and then I was handed over to the paediatric team. And yeah, I didn't really think anything of it until I look back now, and that's really weird because like
It's
he just kind of
ominous.
showed up.
Yeah.
And I look back now, and I think he was probably looking at he was probably looking at my blood. That's probably what he was there going to do, was to look at the blood test. And then we got a text about half an hour later saying they had the test come back up. And I walked into the room. My consultant was sat there on the side of the bed. He said, "We had the results." And I basically said, "I know what you're going to say." And he was really like, "Yeah, look, it is. And we have told Southampton they're expecting you up tomorrow. We're not going to keep you in. Your platelets are ridiculously low. I think they were like 7 on the marker, which she was like, it's the lowest I've ever seen." She's like, "If you cut yourself, you would have been like in the shit."
Jeez.
Um, but he was like, "What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a cannula in you now. I'm going to give you a platelet transfusion, and I want you to go home and just have a nice time as a family. And then, tomorrow, like, expect you at Southampton at like just after lunchtime. So have a nice morning, head up to Southampton with this stuff ready, and then we'll admit you there, and you'll start your next phase of treatment." It just being quite a kind of calm process into that sort of time. And yeah, went up to Southampton, had my lumbar puncture and all that sort of thing, confirmed that the cancer was back, and yeah, said that there was quite a lot of cells. I think she said something like when she did my test, like it was like above 90% of the lumbar puncture test um, was leukemic cells. So she was like, "You have had this for a while because
Right.
there's a lot of cells in here." Um, so then it went on to what we're going to do. And I remember her saying to me, like, "You're going to be 16 in 17 days. Do you want to be involved in this conversation, or do you not want to be involved in the conversations?" And I was like, "Yeah, go on, I'll be involved in the conversations." And she said, "Right, okay, we'll gather the meeting in the room in about half an hour or so, and we'll talk about your options. Went into this room, and this was the first and last time I got involved in the conversation. After that, I was like, "No, Mum, you deal with this. I don't want anything to do with it." But we sat down, and she said to me, she was like, "So you've got an option of a stem cell transplant, which we're going to have to try and find you a match and register. None of your siblings will be matches, unfortunately, because they're all half siblings." And I said, "What happens if we don't have that? We can't find a match." And she said, "Well, we can do trials, but ultimately, if we can't find a match, then there's nothing that we can do. Like we're at that point now where you can go on to clinical trials, but there's nothing else that we can do. Like the chemotherapy hasn't worked first time round. It's not going to work this time round. So we can get you a stem cell transplant donor. If we can do that, then we're going to be fine." We didn't harvest my cells originally because there was none to harvest really. Again, I was so unwell the first time I was diagnosed. So she just basically said that there's one option, there's potential of trials, but there's one clear cut option. If we can get that, then we'll do that. And that was when I was like, actually, you know what? No, I'm not going to be involved. I don't want to be involved. Mum, you deal with it. I'll stay in the room.
That's the conversation to be involved in, isn't it?
Yeah.
Jeez.
So I had that. Had a PICC line put back in, had 2 rounds of chemotherapy, and then had like a kind of, you have like a hiatus between your chemotherapy and your transplant. It's really weird. Like they get your cancer out your body, which they try and do in the first 2 chemotherapies if they can. And I was lucky to do that. And then once they get the cancer out your body, they give you kind of like a hiatus to give you time to kind of recuperate that strength if you're in a position to do so, where you basically go home and you I think I had something like, I want to say it was like nearly 8 weeks at home. So it was a long time, but it's just kind of recuperate your strength. It was like, go out, have time in the sun, like eat loads of food, like spend time with your friends and family, just build that strength back up because you're going to have chemotherapy to have a stem cell transplant. Obviously, I've skimmed over it, but I was fortunate to find a donor on the match. I don't remember that kind of like waiting period. Mum says it was quite nerve wracking. I don't remember being like, I don't remember that because again I was just distracting myself with Xbox and eating Domino's pizza and watching TV.
It's
And
just not in your control, is it? That bit either.
No, it's not. Yeah, and I felt quite at home at Pine Brown because I'd been there before. So like, you had a lot of people that are coming in that had like just been diagnosed, whereas because I'd been there before and I'd spent a lot of time there, as we said, because of the treatment path. I felt really at home. Like the nurses were like family, the doctors were like family. Like I'd walk around the ward and everyone like, "You're right, Ryan." Like they know me, and like if I couldn't sleep, like I'd go into the nurses. They had like a hall in the hallway, in the main hallway. They had like their room, which was like just like a couple of like crappy chairs, and then a desk for the office. And on the night shift, they'd all just sit in there usually and chat, and then go and do the jobs they had to do. And if I couldn't sleep, I'd literally just wheel up there and just sit and chat with them, like, and just be sat in the room just chatting to them about all sorts of things. So I just felt like a veteran really on the wall, like I'd just be kind of like wheeling around just chatting to everybody.
A veteran at 16, yeah.
Yeah, veteran at 16, yeah. And there's people on there that had been through it more than I had. But I think like as a person, I'm quite like that anyway. I'm quite like confident and talkative, and I'll just, if like that's my coping mechanism. Anything like even at work now, I'll make friends and I'll talk to people, and that's how I deal with like being in situations that I'm not comfortable with. I'll talk a lot, and that's just what I did on treatment too. But yeah, had that kind of hiatus of no treatment, going home, and kind of just spending time with family. We did loads of stuff. We all sort of went out for the day, went on walks, like had barbecues, and all the my friends threw me a barbecue like before my transplant, and they all surprised me with a barbecue in the park. We went down there and they were like cooked up meat and everything as well, and had a really good time down there. Just us, like no adults or anything like that. It was just us, all my closest friends from school, and I always be thankful for that. There's a really good picture on my socials of that, of us all, and we took a picture of all of us there, which is good. So that was good. And then I went in to have my Hickman line put in, and this was kind of like the hiccup before the transplant, because they put my Hickman line in, had my operation, obviously routine operation. I also had a peg put into my stomach because I didn't ever have an NG tube. The first time around, they tried to put one in when I was
That's
first ill.
through the nose, is it? Sorry, just for people
Yeah,
listening.
that's through the nose tube. Yeah, through the nose. So I never had one of them because I tried to put one in the first time round because I lost so much weight because of my sore throat and stuff. And I refused, and I wanted them to take it out, and it called at the back of my throat. So they did take it out. And then after that, I just ate. And remember my consultant saying to me, she's literally the first time around, she went, "I've never ever known a child to get through AML treatment without an NG tube because they need to be fed." And then when she said that to me, I was like, "That's a challenge, and I'm going to absolutely do you on that." So I did. I just ate pizza and Pringles and McDonald's and all that sort of thing. And that's another bit. It's like, don't panic about where you're going with it, like what you're eating. Just eat because you need
Yeah.
calories. Your body needs it. Um, but yeah, I had a peg put in because I wouldn't be able to get from a transplant without anything like that, especially the amount of medication I had to take. So that was put in, and the same time a Hickman line was put in. And then I had to spend the night on the cardiologist ward because not because of my heart, but because that was the only place there was a bed.
Mm.
There was no beds on Pine Brown, so after my operation, I had to spend the night in the cardiologist ward, which I hated because I didn't know any of the nurses. They didn't know who I was really. They weren't like they had a nurse coming down from Pine Brown to check on me every now and again, but the nurses that were dealing with me from like time and time again, they were like used to dealing with kids that have got cardiac
Mm.
problems, um, not a cancer patient, which are two different extremes, very serious illnesses at two different
Yeah.
extremes.
Yeah.
And then that night they had to put liquid into my Hickman line for fluid because I couldn't have anything in my stomach because I'd had this operation, put the peg in, which is basically something that goes to the stomach. And they put 3 liters of liquid in because I had to. And then the next day I had a bone marrow aspirate and a lung puncture booked in before my chemotherapy for the transplant, which is going to be done in London. And went up to the Pine Brown ward. And my dad came in because he'd stayed the night, and he came in and he was like, "My son looks so puffed up. Like, why is he so puffed up?" And they're like, "Probably just like a backlash of the operation he had yesterday. It
Mm.
might just be his body, like that sort of thing." He's like, "Fair enough." Dad says now I look like I'm Charlie Chocolate Factory and she turns into Big Blueberry. So
Yeah.
at the beginning of that, that's what I started looking like. Um, so yeah, he sort of did that, and went up for this bone marrow aspirate. They put some anaesthetic into me. The same, basically, we had an operating table on that ward, and he did it all the time. So the same guy I'd had for 2 years put this liquid into me. Nothing happened. Didn't go to sleep on the Hickman line. Put it in the Hickman line. Nothing went happen. Didn't go to sleep. But then I said to him, "I usually had the milky one." And he's like, "Oh yeah, you do, don't you?" So I put a bit of that in, put a bit of the milky one in, and then nothing happened. And then all I remember him saying is that he just said this Hickman line's in the wrong place, and then like started sucking out basically tubes of like like blood coloured liquid stuff and sucking it out of the Hickman line, and then put the gas thing over me to put me to sleep. Did bone marrow aspirate. I woke up half an hour later from it all, and I had doctors and stuff running around my bed. I was absolutely off my head on morphine, so I had no idea what was going on. Dad was like, "Please stop talking so loudly," because I was just like going on and on and on and on and on, and just chatting like rubbish. And basically, yeah, what happened? The Hickman line was in the wrong place, so it had gone into my vein, and then back out the back, but they didn't know that, and they put 3 liters of water into my chest cavity overnight without even realizing. They it was it was a massive fuck up. And the consultant, he was so apologetic, and he put me in a really bad position. I'll never ever talk badly of that though, because we all make mistakes at work, and like we could have fined him, we could have sued him, we could have done whatever we wanted. And I remember just thinking, like, me and Dad talking about it, and I remember saying to him, like, I wouldn't have seen any point in that because he learnt his lesson. Like, it wasn't his fault. These things happen. They changed the procedure around that. They now X-ray from the side and the top to make sure that it's gone into the right place because of stuff like that. And he had to sit and watch the Hickman line being put in the right place. And if we'd sued him, he would have lost his job. And then
Mm.
that's his livelihood, and you don't know what family he's got, and that's not fair. Like, he's young, and I'm fine. Everyone's fine. Everyone's learned from it. It's okay. But yeah, that week it was a bit of a sticky week because it was like the transfer had to happen at a certain time because it's all timed up and lined. The chemotherapy and everything has to happen at a certain time because it's all timed up and lined. I couldn't have a chest drain put in because my blood cells were too low and it was risk of infection, could have killed me. Some of the consultants again were like, my oxygen levels were so low. I think it was like 70% oxygen in my blood because I wasn't able to breathe because of it. And they were like, again, there's another point where they're like, he could potentially die now because like he can't breathe properly and he's struggling. And I had a week of just lying in a hospital bed, waiting for my body just to absorb all of this water. There's nothing they could do. It was just like we
So
have
they
to
couldn't get it out. It just had to naturally.
just naturally. They had to just hope that my body would naturally just absorb it and get rid of it. That's all they could do. And they did that. And luckily I was able to in the week. I remember just the most annoyed thing I'd lost a week at home
Yeah.
because I was supposed to go and have the operation and go home on the Friday and then be at home for a week and then go up to London. And I'd lost a week at home. But look, it is what it is, and it happened, and it's one of those things. And I was fortunate then to go on to my transplant and have a transplant, and then I was in isolation for I think it was four and a half or 5 weeks, which isn't that long in the grand scheme of things with a transplant. And I was able to get out, and I'm here today, and I've managed to sort of do everything I've done off the back of that. So, you know, mistakes happen. Everyone makes mistakes at work. I make mistakes at work, and it was going to be no point suing him. That's not fair. It wasn't going to do anything other than give people money. And what were we going to do with the money? Like spend it on holiday? We wouldn't have had it now. Like it would have all been spent by now. So that was pointless. There would no point in doing that. And ultimately, I was fortunate to be in a position to have a transplant anyway. So, yeah, it was one of those things that was another little hairy moment in the story. But we got over it and we moved and we were fine. So it went all right.
Your language around what you've been through is a little hairy moment, just teetering on something incredibly catastrophic happening. Ryan, sorry, mate. I'm conscious that you're. What time it is? Are you?
Yeah, I'm all good at the moment. We're all good. I'm not had any text or anything, so we're okay.
Oh, perfect. We can edit this. So, do you want to just carry on talking, or do you want to go to the 5 questions, or do you want to literally split this podcast in half? Because I'm conscious we're talking. We haven't got to anywhere else really. Usually, I talk about everything.
I'm happy to do whatever you feel is best. Really, what would you feel is best? Obviously, it's your podcast, so.
Oh, mate, I'm free and breezy. I don't want to not tell your story, so I'd love to be able to split it in half with you. Like, we can film this now. We can always do a bit proceeding, saying me and Ron had to do this in 2 halves. Doesn't matter if we're wearing different clothes or whatever. So,
yeah.
And then we can do the questions at the end last time. So, should we just carry on talking whenever you're comfortable? Finish, and then wait a couple of seconds and be like, guys, I've got to shoot now. So, is that all right?
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
Wicked. So you had your stem cell transplant, which is obviously a huge thing to do, and thankfully you were a 10 out of 10 match via Anthony Nolan. What happened after your stem cell transplant? Was that sort of the end? Is that?
Yeah. So I had my stem cell transplant, and then you go on like a weekend leave. It's weird. Like you have your diet, like you finish your treatment, you wait for your cells to come back up again. The stem cell transplant, and I'll be frank with this because I think you have to be frank with someone that's going to go through it. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and it was tough, and I was very, very unwell, and I think people need to prepare themselves for that. Don't go in going, it's going to be horrible. My advice is to go in with stuff to do, box sets to watch. I had a little thing to keep me ticking over, which was a little Lego camper van, which I've still got, which I built over that time, just to keep my brain ticking. But don't go in with the expectation of you're going to feel amazing. You're going to get up and you're going to stretch every day. And you're going to do this and you're going to do that. You're going to do that. You're going to do what you need to do at the end of the day. And like I went in with this, like I'm going to watch box sets. I'm going to get up. I'm going to do that. I'm going to play FIFA. I'm going to do that. And I had days where I didn't even want to play FIFA, which was rare for me going through all that stuff. I'd always played Xbox. I didn't even want to do that some days. I wanted to just lie in bed. Like you're going to be. There was the most unwell that I've been over all my treatment, if I'm completely honest with you. But that's because they give you, as my consultant in the Royal Marsden in Surrey, where I had it said, they give you like the big dogs of chemotherapy that they only get out for like this stuff. Like they don't get it out very often. The level that they give you is, he said to me, it's like basically switching your computer off and then switching it back on again. You take your body down to as low as you possibly can, and then you boost up with these stem cells and wait for your body to kind of hopefully take it, and it's going to be okay. And I was so unwell, like I was sick every day. Like I remember sleeping, wake up, I had diarrhea, like in the bed in the middle of the night. Like I didn't even realize I'd done that. Like, and I woke up and like that's embarrassing in itself, but it's just one of those things you get over it, and it happens, and you laugh after a while.
Everyone shits themselves, Ryan. That's the one thing.
You're trying to cut it in the bud when you're younger, but it happens sometimes when you go into that as well. But like that's another thing that happened, and it's weird. Like you feel sick, and Mum said to me, like she said to me as well, it was the most unwell I'd seen you in it, because I didn't want to talk. Like I said earlier, I talk, I'm nervous, and I didn't even want to talk because my mouth was so sore. But then you get better, and you get there, and you go through that pain, you go through that time. But ultimately, it is a short. It feels like a long time when you're in it, but it is a short time when you look back. Like I couldn't tell you how many days I was unwell for, but to me, it probably feels like a week, 2 weeks max. And then you go with this weekend leave where, very fortunate, my auntie lived in London at the time, so she kind of allowed us to stay at a flat with her. So me and Mum went to her flat. She's my mum's twin. Don't look anything like each other, but they're twins. So we stayed there at the flat for the weekend. We went on a little football tour. She drove us around in her car, went to all the London stadiums in one day, which was fun. Saw the Olympic Stadium. Obviously, West Ham had pretty much just moved into it, so popped up there. Um, sorry, then yeah, but basically had a weekend just sort of chilling out and kind of getting used to what life was going to be like after transplant at home, and then you go back to hospital. Unfortunately, I wasn't quite right just yet, and my infection markers went up when I was at home for the weekend. So I was in hospital for another week, just having antibiotics, that sort of thing. But then I was able to kind of come off out of my room at that point because it was just an infection, like I wasn't isolated. So they'd give me antibiotics, and I could kind of walk around the ward, and you go up onto the rooftop with Dad and sort of sit in the sun. It was such a hot summer. It was like I think mid 20s, like every day. The sun was beaming. You just go on walks around like the hospital grounds, that sort of thing. There was like a lavender field up the road that Mum found when she was running. We walked up to that one day and that sort of thing. Had this week kind of just getting better again. And then after that week, my infection cleared up and I was able to go home for good. So I went back down to Dorset, and yeah, got back into life there. And I'd say that first, you go through like 90 days of like your first time out, and you have like 90 days, and it's like 90 days, first 90 days, which they always talk about. Like it's like the 5 years they talk about. It's like one of those time frames they just always talk about. So post transplant, your time frame is that 90 days. That's they always mention it.
And that's making sure your body is comfortable with the stem cells, not rejecting them, and you're
Yeah,
generally
just making sure that you're just continuing on that kind of trajectory of going up and up and up and in the right direction. And I would say that was probably the most like depressed I've ever felt in those days, being frank, because it was just my life was wake up, and then I'd have my morning medication, and then I'd have breakfast, and then I'd have my lunchtime medication, and then I'd have dinner, and then I'd have my evening medication, and then I go to bed. And I just did that every single day. I wasn't able to go anywhere because my immune system was still too low. So it was like I'd wake up, I'd usually just lie in bed for a bit, and then get up, go and have some breakfast and medication. I think it was like 12 medications I had to take in the morning. And then I'd sit on the sofa and watch TV. I might go and sit in the garden with the dogs for a bit. No, it wouldn't be the dogs then, because the dogs weren't even allowed back. So we didn't have our animals. I grew up with dogs my whole life, so they were up with my grandparents until that period had gone. So we didn't have them either. So I was just at home with Dad. Mum was working. My sisters were at school. And yeah, we'll just do this every single day, and I'm just like doing it. And it was like me and Dad was sit because he was working, he was building a museum at the time, so he was like curating this museum from home. We'd sit at lunchtime, and Dad would make us beef and onion, like raw onion sandwiches, and we'd sit and we watch Only Fools and Horses for like an hour and a half of a cup of tea at lunchtime, and that was a bit of the day that I look forward to. And I just potter about at home with not really a lot to do.
Was there a lot of
Yeah,
time thinking about everything you've been through as well?
yeah, I think a lot of
You're at
that probably
home.
was when I started to think about what I'd been through while I was at home. Probably why I started feeling down. Um, couldn't do schoolwork because I wasn't at school. And then kind of would be like appointments. I think to start off with, it was like I'd be in Southampton on Tuesday for an appointment, and then I'd be in London on Thursday for an appointment. I did that every week for like the first 3 weeks. So that's a big strain on parents as well, having to drive me to these appointments. And then like London's a 3.5 hour journey from where we were, so it was like those Thursdays were wiped off because I'd be at home, leave at like 7, up for the appointment, and wouldn't be getting back to like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night. It's like a full day. And then yeah, that those then they dissipate and they get further and further apart, and you get past like 90 days, and your life starts sort of finding normality again. And that's like what's just kind of happened from there. Like I've just kind of found normality, and I've gone through like your normal teenage phases of doing like 1 minute I'm like wanting to be a DJ, next minute I want to do this and that want to do that, and then I've kind of like found my way in life, and met my now wife, and we've ended up having a baby, and we're looking at hopefully buying a house, and we're married, and it's just I look back now and I think it's all kind of like shifted like that. And I think that's I look at my page now as well, and like I've got obviously the L card as my Instagram page, and I look at what that's about, and it used to be a lot about like these are the symptoms, that's the symptoms, but now like I look at it and I talk openly about how I feel, and I do events and I talk to people and stuff like that. But it's more so like when I ask myself now, what is that page about? It's like become like a platform, I think, for me, but also hopefully other people. But for me to kind of show that there's a life after, and that it's not, you can go on and do things, and I get to do it, not even through cancer, just through like life things. I've gone on holidays, and I've done stuff with my friends, and I've gone to events and stuff like that, and I just kind of share that. with people. So yeah, it's one of those things, like, your life just does carry on, and it's weird. You look at it, and it does carry on, and then it flicks up every now and again. So yeah, it's just one of those things. So
It's amazing. Can I just say, because life is happening around you, and you telling everything that you've gone through, and hearing your life and your family in the background is so heartwarming, because it's just a beautiful reminder of all that you've been through and where you are now. And certainly not going to edit it out. We're going to leave baby noises in, because I think it's a
it's
beautiful backdrop. No, it's exactly what you're saying. Life has carried on. Life, and I know we don't have time right now, but hopefully when we have time for volume 2 of Ryan, we can talk about how what you've been through has framed your outlook and how that's framed your life moving forwards. That would be
definitely, like I say, like, there's a long old story to talk about, and like I say, it's chaos going on about us all the time. Like, our little boy's found his voice, nothing as well, and we're finding life as new parents, which obviously you appreciate, and other people I'm sure listening would appreciate. That can be difficult, but yeah, look, I'm thankful I kind of talk about it. I don't talk about it as much as I used to. I'm not as, I think, predominant about it on reels and stuff as I used to be. That's because I found a kind of new area in my life now, and I'm open to talking. I'm open to going to events and talking and sharing my story and talking to people that are going through it. I'll always chat to them too. And in my page is more about my life now and who I am, and it's not so much what it used to be, but that's just because I have found this new area in my life, and that's probably more of like a testament to people when they're going through it, to them look at that and go, actually, you'll find a new area in your life as well, and you will go past and you move past it, and then it'll still be a big part of your life, and it'll still always be there, but it won't always be the thing. You'll have other parts of your life that you have to focus on, and that's important too. And it's cancer's take, but you can take back from it as well, and you give other parts to other areas as well too. So yeah, I'm fortunate to sit here and talk, and I know how fortunate I am, and I'm fortunate to have a family, and be in that wonderful world of parenting, which is chaotic in itself and a new test. But yeah, it's feel thankful for it every day. So
I love that framing as well, because I think we all know cancer, like you say, cancer doesn't go anywhere. It's all consuming, and then you come out, and I imagine it's all consuming, but slowly, as you've shown, life can just build around that, and the cancer's still there, but it just is a reframing of that, and it's building those extra parts as they come out. And yeah, I think you showcasing that brings a lot of inspiration and solace for a lot of people. So I'm very, very excited to deep dive into that. Sorry, Ryan. Have you got enough time? Because we can do the 5 questions now if you want, and we can also
do like a minute. So
that's fine. Yeah, we'll do it another time. Okay. So I think for today, that is probably a wonderful place to end. I just want to thank you for your time in your very, very busy day, for taking the time to be here with us. And what we'll do next time is we will mash 2 episodes together, and we will capture everything that's happened post that stem cell transplant to lead you to where you are today, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on. Like, I'm looking forward to obviously diving into that life after, and looking at how things have gone. But no, thanks for giving me the time to speak. And I always feel like they're a little bit of a therapy session as well. You voice your words again, so you feel lighter. But no, I do appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for listening, and thank you to our amazing supporters and funders who make this podcast happen. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a review and follow us on social media at Thrive Against Cancer. And be sure to check out our other episodes wherever you listen to your podcasts and on YouTube. If you want to help support our mission to give a voice to the cancer community, please contact us or visit our website to learn more at thriveagainstcancer.co.uk.